Hi, it's Rich Hoffman here. So what do I think about all the CIA leaks that are occurring end of 2024, going to 2025, regarding life on Mars? The the regression therapy techniques that they've used, I've talked about them a little bit with Dolores Cannon and some of the articles that I've written about her interactions with people who claim to know Jesus. We know the CIA has used the same kind of regression techniques, past memories, hypnosis, to find candidates who are carriers for past knowledge. How true any of that is, I think there's probably a lot of truth in it when you start unraveling quantum mechanics, because I think that's where a lot of this information resides, and not in the traditional way that science has yet to kind of put the finger on and understand. But a lot of these leaks are coming out now because you're having a change. And there's a lot of talk about dismantling a lot of these three-lettered agencies. And CIA, I think, to throw some meat out there, and because they know that Trump's planning on declassifying a bunch of stuff. There's a lot we're going to learn quickly. And some of the leaks that are coming out to kind of brace everybody for impact is that there's objects on Mars, there's pyramids that were made by very large people, and then it sort of connects to the biblical canon of very large people that inhabited the land of Canaan, and the days of Enoch and the book of Enoch, and these lost chapters that didn't get a lot of attention in the Bible were referenced to in a kind of a cryptic way. So I think there's some truth to that stuff. That's why I think it's important to take science and apply it. That's why I'm a fan of the Occupy Mars. Now that I see that Elon Musk is in a position, since I've watched the last Starship actually become reusable, come back and return to the pad, the technology that they've been developing at SpaceX is actually going to happen. I've been much more excited about this whole Occupy Mars concept because I see that as a flourishing new economy. There's a lot of good things that can happen, and I tend to think that when we do get there, I know Elon Musk doesn't really think much about aliens coming from Mars and living on Mars, but I think we have an inherent understanding that Mars has some part in our past, and it's not an accident that the early Romans and a lot of their gods were named after celestial bodies, and Mars is the god of war, in a lot of references to ancient civilizations. I think we're going to find out through archaeology that we've kind of missed the boat on a couple of things. Since archaeology was a new field, we drew conclusions too quickly and built assumptions around them that have turned out to be totally wrong. It's not that it's bad to, get things a little off. You're supposed to have speculative analysis, that you collect information and you make your best assumption based on that information. And what we're going to find out, I think, in regard to the linear development of human civilization, is that we were incorrect in assuming that we started as like apes and evolved into who we are today. And now we have lights and buildings, and we have little things where you can pick up the poop from your dog. We're a technological society, and we have innovations that we've developed, and yay, we came out of a cave and now we can pick up poop from a dog. We've evolved, and I think the truth is that that evolution occurred elsewhere. I think we're going to find that, not to say, to get too much into the ancient aliens theories about things, but we're going to find out that we probably came from somewhere else, and we're a mixture of lots of things that came from other places, and then we settled on Earth. And the evidence of that is going to go back to an extended period. So we tend to measure our society on a chronology of here to here, and what we're going to learn is that it's been here to here, devolve, then start over, and it's a reoccurring cycle. And I point to Finnegan's Wake, the great book by James Joyce, to kind of wrap your mind around that concept, and that the cycle we're currently in, just a few thousand years old, and we measure it by the Bible. This is how old is, and everything started. God created the earth, Adam and Eve, and then you had an evolution of cycles and destructions that ended with Jesus Christ on the cross. And then he had advocates out there spreading Christianity, and the Roman Empire adopted it, and then Europe became Christianized, and as it became the temple for the West. What we're going to find is that we had many histories prior to that segment. So that's just one cycle of an idea evolving, and a society gets created and spawned off of it. What we're going to discover is that we had advanced civilizations that were during the Archaic period. So if archaeologists were talking about Indians running around in North America that were building huts and were hunters and gatherers, we're finding out that all through the BCs and up past 5,000 BC and 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 BC, up to 11,000, 12,000 BC, there's a lot of technology and civilization, and that there was a global civilization where people were communicating all across the world. And that doesn't mean they were flying around in UFOs, but it means that they were able to talk and share ideas. Because you see that in the mound builders. And the rate of erosion has destroyed a lot of the remnants of those previous civilizations. But where you find the evidence is in the previous coastlines. And I don't think a lot of people realize that the first civilizations that existed on Earth are underwater. Because during the Ice Age, the levels of the oceans were 450 some feet lower than they are today. And that means that the entire English Channel, the Persian Gulf up down to Qatar, was completely a valley, completely above water. And a lot of the ocean levels were locked up in ice caps. So you might have had moderate temperatures around the equator and around the central part of the Earth. But the ocean levels were much lower because the ice caps and glaciers were so high and occupying so much mass. And the weight of the ice pushed on the crust, which changed the coastlines of things. And so as you had warming cycles and cooling cycles, which happen all the time based on the tilt of the Earth's axis over many millions of years, you've seen many, many cycles. And I think we're going to find, once we do the right kind of exploration, if you get into the Persian Gulf and start doing explorations, or you get around Cuba and start looking at all the stuff that's around Cuba, you start getting into areas where the entire landmass from Japan to China was completely above water. There was no Sea of Japan. There was no areas there that were not that were underwater. It's all above. And I've been to Japan several times, and I've pointed out, I've done videos from there showing some of the really bizarre rock formations that you see, especially around Kyoto and Kobe, Osaka, the Keystone cultures. There's the tombs. There is a lot going on in Japan, and I've made the connection straight to the Empire of King Solomon, the Silk Road. And if you lower the water levels, and you know that civilization was around, which we do know from Turkey, we know that there was a lot going on that predates Christianity by many thousands of years, tens of thousands of years. Like including the city of Eridu, the ancient city that we know about that's right next to Ur. You've got to remember, Abraham was born in Ur, right next to Eridu. And Eridu is around probably 8,000 BC. And they have a pretty advanced mythologies in temple worship that is now kind of part of that Göbekli Tepe in Turkey complex. And go through Syria, you find out that there's entire spans of the whole amount of time that Christianity and the Hebrews emerged with this current biblical culture. that you had life cycles that had civilizations that are going way back into the deep BCs, where obviously there was a lot of human technology and intellect at the time. And what I'm saying is, you could easily, during the Ice Age and pre-Ice Age periods, see evidence, especially if you get into where the previous coasts were, and start dealing with the fact that a lot of the stuff that these early civilizations was on oceanfront property that is no longer there. Eridu, during different periods, especially 8000 BC, there was a time when the water of the whole Persian Gulf was completely filled with land, and there's settlements, entire cities are going to be at the bottom of it. And then it had a melting period where the water rose, and there was actually Ur and Eridu were oceanfront property. And then they receded back to their current state where they are now, which is, miles away from the current coastline. This has been going on for a long time. A lot of the cities we have, whether it's Miami, New York, you look around the world, a lot of the biggest cities are on oceanfront property. But those oceans have not stayed the same. And we've seen through the evolutionary period, the way archaeologists have got it wrong, is a measured time based on the current map of the world and the way the oceans look. And if you assume that the oceans were always moving, whether they were 450 feet lower than they are now, or they're at the present state, or whether there's some variation in between, and that the weight of water and ice manipulates the crust and then manipulates plate tectonics in a way that you're always changing your water frontage. If you really want to understand where we came from, you have to go underwater, and you have to look at the previous coastlines and the cities that were residing there. And then you start seeing that you had intelligent development that goes back 12,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago. And if you start really getting into the depths of the water, you're going to find 30, 40, 50,000 years. There's stuff that's going on in Japan that's off the coast there. When they had a different coastline, they have a very tectonically violent area there. The plates are always moving, so you have constantly shifting land masses. But you see very advanced stonework in those places that have not even been touched as far as assumptions on what we're going to learn. So it's one thing to know the chronology, and a lot of archaeologists have done a lot of hard work to figure out these things, and I'm happy they did, because that gives you something to talk about. But then you can't stop your assumptions. You got to keep collecting evidence and asking questions and driving answers to the forefront. And based on what I know about all this stuff, I think we're in the infancy of understanding it, and we're going to get into the oceans and do some real archaeology and find out that we were probably colonized by Mars. We're going back to Mars. We want to occupy Mars because I think in a lot of ways we're going home. And that's what I think, based on my knowledge. Now, that could change based on more information that comes in, but I don't think that we were... I think we have an inherent understanding that we want to get back there. And I think these CIA leaks are part of this regression technology, that we have a part of ourselves that have these quantum characters living in it that are giving us memories from that period, and that we settled here from other places, and that Mars was settled from other places, and the universe has been seeded in such a way, time and time again, cycle for cycle, and that ideas come, we develop them, we shape them into ways that work for us, but that the origins of them come from years of tribulation from many different places. And to explain why you had such large people at a period in the Bible that were called giants, and we see them everywhere. I've gone to many mound sites all over. I live in Ohio. Many mound sites where they want to call them Hopewell and Adena Indians that built them, and they have all this reverence for celestial bodies, but they're really tall people. And the skeletons of these mounds, some of them are 8-9 feet tall. And you would get that from a culture that comes from a low gravity environment, such as Mars. And it would take a while for the genetics for Earth's gravity to alter the size and genetics of people who came from other places. But that would explain, as you're trying to put some of these pieces together, if you get the edges of the puzzle and you start seeing how the straight edges line up and you start filling in the body of the puzzle, you start seeing how things connect. And we're starting to see that, well, that would explain why there were larger people in the land of Canaan if you start associating these areas with settlement and not an emergence. One thing that really I find interesting is there's several cities, several locations in Turkey, just north of Israel and Syria and Lebanon, that had very advanced stone manipulation ability to tunnel out. And they're dating these places to be in the 8,000s, 10,000s, Göbekli Tepe, 12,000 BC period. And you're seeing a technology that obviously was able to manipulate large stones and move them around and cut tunnels with really rudimentary tools in ways that we just don't understand. And there's these vast colonies in Turkey of that. We see the same evidence under the temple in Jerusalem, which I've always been Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah was something before anybody came there. And when King David bought the property to build the temple and put the threshing floor out there, it was built on the location where supposedly Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac. So there's it's referenced in the Bible as a place that already had meaning. And if you go to Zechariah Ascension, he's always talking about how the stones, the foundation stone, that was where the Ark of the Covenant was kept, was a point of entry, probably they call it the navel of the world, so Islam calls it. And why do they call it that? Was that an original site where settlements came and settled and populated the region as initially? And I think we would find out if you go into the Persian Gulf or go into the different seas that are in the area and consider that the land masses were lower, you'd probably find evidence of that early settlement, the early civilization, where it came from, and why they were there. Because when I mentioned tunnels, what has me so confounded about Mount Moriah is they want to say that a lot of these kings from the Bible made these tunnels to bring water underneath the temple complex, but it's looking more and more like they were already there. That they were there way before David made his threshing floor, or before even Abraham tried to sacrifice Isaac there. That Mount Moriah was already an important milestone in the region, and that it was a pinnacle place that the Bible wanted to incorporate into its story, into the narrative of this Yahweh bringing people to the promised land. But why was that promised land so valuable? And I think that's parts that you do further investigation, archaeology. You start filling it by getting out into the depths of some of the water that doesn't get a lot of attention, but it should. And I think what you're going to find when you get there is that those regions have the traces of a settlement from Mars that came and brought a lot of information and technology. And that's why you have a sudden emergence of all these city-states in that region and other places in the world. And that's how they were all able to globally have the same ideas, because they came from the same source. Because when you get to Mars, I think we're going to find out that we have the same kinds of architecture, same kind of ideas, same kind of mounds and burial practices and mythologies. And we're going to learn that as we get across the surface. And that regression therapists that the CIA tapped into learned all this years ago and been trying to keep it from everybody because it's it could be shattering to a culture that's not prepared to think it, but it's also power for these three-letter agencies to withhold information from people so you control them better. But as we start breaking into what Area 51 is, what kind of technology we evolved, what we reverse engineered, what's the true history? What are we studying and why? And once you uncover that and you find the evidence of it underwater, not necessarily on the ground. And you start looking at things with an objective mind based on the evidence that you uncover. I think we're going to find that as we occupy Mars and return there, we're going to find that those dots will connect with what we learned here on Earth as far as our origins go. And we're going to learn that our story is much older and took place over a longer period of time than anybody previously gave it credit for. When people think that cycles of existence advance in a logical way, I would say go to any neighborhood that's been over the last 100 years, started as a thriving community and is now a dump, and look at the policies that made it that way, the decisions that humans made that allowed all these nice Victorian homes to be in like a neighborhood like Avondale, Cincinnati, and they went from being a prosperous community to a very crime-ridden community full of drugs and gangbangers and all kinds of bad derelict behavior that's going on. It's the decisions that humans make and bad policy of government that destroy societies. It's not necessarily an evolution from beginning to end when we rub sticks together to make fire and then we end up making a trash can or a nice boat to go down a river. And that's not necessarily the rate of progression. That's our lack of human understanding based on our lack of intellect in a society that has not, in science, that has not advanced enough. It's got 100 years of evolution, not thousands. The scientific approach needs to have a larger scope, and that larger scope means you need to not just look at what's on land, and contentious areas like Jerusalem is the most contested spot in the world. But why? And what's with the tunnels underneath the current, under Mount Moriah and its long history through the Bible to the present contentions where Islam won't even allow Christians up into the Temple Mount, where the foundation stone is, because they claim it's where Allah resided and had very big events that occurred there, as opposed to that's where King Solomon built his temple. That's where the Holy of Holies was. It's where the Ark of the Covenant that kept the Ten Commandments resided. And we're supposed to yield this history to this new coming Islamic religion. New coming because they didn't come along till like 600 AD. So you look at the way politics and religion shape up to kind of conceal the truth, and then you have a CIA that clearly was getting information through regression hypnosis that says that there's settlements on Mars, and they're head of the Trump coming back into office. They're leaking it, and people are asking questions. Well, what's this all mean? And I think we're going to find that it actually means quite a lot, and they've been holding it back for a long time, and they're releasing it now because they know Trump's planning on declassifying all this stuff, and it's about time that we have a honest conversation with ourselves about what all this means and what our real history has been and how we actually arrived where we did. And that's why I support so much that Elon Musk wants to go to Mars. I think we should. I think we have it in our innate instinct to return, not to the new world, but to our home world. And I think the science, if you get underwater and look at the origins of Sumerian civilization and the way Jerusalem evolved as a hot point, the archaeology of North America and Central America and South America, and date some of these sites with LiDAR technology and see just how much civilization was similar wrapped all around the earth. And I think we're going to find out that the same ideas and concepts and celestial worship is going to be all over Mars when we get there and set up colonies to repopulate it, is the way I like to look at it. And we're going to learn a lot about ourselves in the process, which isn't a bad thing. It might be harmful to people who aren't quite ready to accept the length of time that we've been doing this kind of stuff. And then I say that a lot of our assumptions about the origins of the world still hold true and God's place in it, but the scope of it gets much larger when you start incorporating the settlement of Mars and settlement from other planets and how Earth was actually colonized and came about, and what the battles really mean, what historic landmarks really entail. And why they are what they are, I think you'll find the answer in the depths of the oceans. You'll find it at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. You find it off the coast of Cuba and the Bahamas. You find it off the coast of Japan, off the coast of India, all around the world. You'll see all kinds of interesting things, and what you find is a culture that's going to mimic what we saw 20,000, 25,000 years ago, that would date back from that we'll see on the surface of Mars. Same kind of pyramid settlements, same kind of mound building techniques, same celestial alignments, the same essential culture that came from Mars and came to Earth and came to where the previous coastlines were, but are now covered because the oceans rose to their current height. They'll probably drop down again, they'll rise again, they'll do all kinds of things because nothing's ever in motion. Climate change is just an excuse to try and freeze time to an assumption so you can drive a political narrative. But the Earth is always moving, and if we're not moving with it or moving off of it or trying to always find new ways to do things, then you're setting yourself up for failure. And I'm looking for a chance to occupy Mars. I like that Elon Musk is driving to get there. I think the technology of SpaceX is going to be wonderful, and I think we've only just begun to tap the archaeology of human race, and that we're going to find ourselves in the future by discovering our past on places we never thought previously we would be dealing with. And it's very exciting. I think it's very exciting. I can't wait to find out everything we can find out. It might be totally wrong. Everything I said might be totally off base, but that's why you explore, and that's why you conduct real science. That's why you gather evidence and information. But I think the more we gather, the more valid what I just said is all going to be true. And we're going to find out that our adventure goes way back, and it's going to be interesting to chronicle through good science. Lance Rich Hoffman here. Share, subscribe, make tomorrow a better day. If you haven't read my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to Business, I think you'll love it. Anyway, have a good day. See you later.